It's actually a pretty nice day today. A little chilly. Bob was saying there was a little bit of wind, and he's kind of right. And he's brought out some of his collection. Metal Jonsereds, various states of disrepair. Look at that one on the end. I think he wants to run that one today.
No.
No?
I gotta get run today.
So, some Metal Jonsereds, and then some of the later ones. Still metal, but 1980s era. And we kind of came up with an idea of doing a survival guide on these, because as parts have become no longer available, some of this stuff you can go into the Husqvarna parts bin and keep them going. That's kind of what he wants to talk about today in a little bit more detail. There he is.
All right, it's a nice day in Ulster County here. 36 degrees it is, sunny. There's a little bit of an annoying breeze. The weather that Walt left in to come down here got a lot different than this. Yeah, so you left in snow and freezing rain.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Just, you know, when did you actually come out of it?
10 o'clock, 9:30, 10.
Yeah, where were you though?
Before deposit, just before
Okay.
deposit.
Yeah, so you're coming across, heading
Yeah.
east. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to call this a survival guide because a lot of guys have asked questions. And the basic premise here is all this 625, 630 Jonsered series, 670s, the real specific Jonsered parts you really pretty much can't get anymore. So the idea is, you know, we got to keep these going. So this is going to cover what kind of Husky parts you can use and some other ways to cheat. You know, we say, well, you can't get the parts because a lot of guys, a lot of shops, oh, you can't get that anymore. There's no way to get it. In some cases it's true. You know, like you can't get, you know, plastic and stuff like that. But I guess the assumption here is you're starting with a complete saw. So the idea is for a guy that's got saws in the, you know, in the garage, and it's like, well, you know, I can't get what I need. Well, maybe you can. So the idea is, if anybody with this survival guide thing takes out a saw that you kind of gave up, you know, then this is that's what we want to do. You know, pull it out of the garage. You can get it going, and we're going to like run through a few of the options that you got here. Now, I brought out some gems. Walt hasn't seen the entire collection yet. This 670 is new. It's never been run. And it's a 1997, and last year they made them. Still got the tags on it. It's got kind of a vintage bar. So this stays up in the ex-wife's walk-in closet and doesn't really come out very often. No, we're not going to run it today because no, you're only a virgin once. And so that's not going to get used. These are a couple of really nice 630s. And for a little illustration, you know, to kind of illustrate the differences, this is the later single coil. This is an early twin coil. The years. Us old timers got to put our specs on. Let's see. This is 1994, and this is 1985. So they're about 10 years apart. You see the, you know, some of the differences. But just about everything we're going to cover today will apply to both of these. Okay. Have you got a 670?
I have one in parts. I don't have a complete one.
Yeah. So, cylinders. Let's say you got a saw in the garage that's blown up. All right. Worst case scenario. Well, your bottom end is good. This is a 670 top end. This is used. It's really kind of in good shape. It's usable again if I need it. And then this is a from a 625. And the idea is, what cylinders are left? Well, you can go to the Husky cylinders. You got aftermarket, and you've got, you know, obviously the OEM stuff. And you got your 61s. You can still get, if you wanted to keep this as a 48mm open port. You got your 268 open port, which everybody, open port. Well, you know, that's a good running saw. And the idea is, you know, to take the thing, you got a dead saw, you got to turn it into a live saw. So that's available, and of course the 272, which is what most people are going to want to do. The 272 and the 268 open port, they share the you know, the intake. And that's the other thing, like the intake pieces. You know, the 630 shares the intake with the 266 Husky, and those blocks you can't get anymore. They all look alike. The hardware's not alike, so you have to inspect that. Sometimes they crack. They changed the hardware because they were trying to minimize heat transfer to the carburetor, which is ultimately what they ended up with on the 272s with those long plastic sleeve bolts. That would cause a lean out. So let's just say this is a 625. Yeah, come on over here. You got to get in this. I mean yourself, not just. But, you know, probably what you would want to do with a 625 is turn it into a 272, which is what I did with this. This saw is in good shape, and a former attachment, and she was a really sweet gal. Got this at a yard sale, you know, running as a 625, all right, for 10 bucks. I said, 10? That's all? Yeah, there was a tag on it, $10. And she said, there's another one there, but it wasn't a Jonsered. What the heck was it? And it was, I guess it was a Craftsman because it was gray with a black top. So I was like, ah, that's right, you can leave that there. I never liked the 61s and the 625s. I don't think they really ran that strong. And even though this was, you know, so this is really, this whole top end is in really fine shape. Not that many hours on it. And I took the whole thing off, carburetor and all. I figured I was never going to run this as a 625 when I got other more interesting things that look the same, you know, to pick up. So this is a 272 top end now. And so some of the things that I had to do, the top ends bolt right on. It's all about the intake. Now the thing that's good about the 272 or 268 top ends is that whether you go aftermarket or OEM, all the intake pieces are still available. Every single one of them. You get the bolts, you get the holders, you know, the filter holders, the intake block, the gaskets. It's all still available. So that's what we did here. And this carburetor, see, the carburetors actually is what really gets tricky. You know, it's easy to do the intake because, and this is a filter holder. You can still get this. It's just like from a 61, or I don't know, not a 268 would be different. That's going to be there's two different styles of that. So you can get all these things, and here again, the hardware's still available. The carbs is what gets tricky, because there's two different ways to pulse the carburetors. Now the 625 or the 670 got this, you know, this pulse line coming out of the side of the cylinder, right? Everybody's familiar with that. It goes to the top of the carburetor, right? That's how you pulse the carburetor with these things. So if you want to switch to the Husky top end, it's going to be pulsed through the block. What do? Well, all these HS Tillotson carburetors are pulsed one or two ways. It's either, you know, with this external line, or it's through the intake block, and they're all kind of, you know, pulsed the same place. And so what I did, this was actually a 670 carb, and it had the this other top thing on, which I got rid of. You can still get these tops, either the one with the elbow or the one without the elbow. They're expensive too. You know, so here again, you're assuming that you got some extra HS carbs laying around. If you had to buy this top with the elbow, it's like $54, and this top you can still get, I think it's like $25. All right, so you have to drill a hole, and we got these things. We prepped some of this stuff by loosening up all these screws, and we're going to try to do this without knocking the screws into the grass. This is actually a carburetor HS, you know, from 49 SP. So they're all going to have this little detent here, and that's where you drill it. And I don't know, let's make sure I'm in here. All right, you drill this right here, but you know, you find a drill that's that same size, and you only have to go as far as that hole right there. So you just, you know, just drill, and there you go. Actually, this one goes all the way back to the second hole, so I guess that's what I did. So yeah, all you got to do is open that up, and now the carburetor will pulse through the block. All right,
The Husky block.
yeah, and if you don't have one of these flat tops, you know, to replace it, really, you know, I had plenty of them laying around. You could just plug that, put some goop in there. It's not a big deal. So that's what gets tricky. But that's not all that gets tricky on the carburetors. I'm putting this back together now because if I don't, those screws are going to be God knows where.
Well, you're going to cover the high idle thing at some
Yeah.
point, right?
Oh yeah. There's like 2 ways to do it, and then there's the Cobb way, when you have no other alternatives. This was the easy part of the carburetors. The other thing that gets a little bit tricky is the linkages. Husky saws of this era, the high idle was set here. With your with the latch, the external latch on the tank. All right, and the Jonsers don't do that. They're a little ahead of their time, and all their stuff was, you know, the high idle was set with a choke, like on the newer saws. I got 372s, and you know, and like on the 572. All right, so what's missing? If you're going to stick with the Jonsered carburetor, you're going to have all this extra linkage in there, okay, and that's going to suffice to get your set your high idle. If you're going to put the Husky carb in, none of that stuff's going to be there. The kind of the chintzy way to get around that is most of the clutch engagement is on any of these saws are going to be say like 3,500. So you can kind of raise your idle up just a little bit, you know, to like 3,200. And as long as you don't have a worn out clutch spring, you know, it'll kind of help you start the saw. You don't have to have a high idle, you know, going to, you know, 6,000 or 7,000 RPMs every time you start the chainsaw. So it's just, you know, in worst case scenario, just crank your static idle up. But there's 2 ways to do that. That's one of the problems. This 625 is one of the newer ones, the single coil ones. All the single coil saws, the idle screw is on the carburetor. Okay, and you know, you got that channel that you go on through with your adjustment screwdriver down through here. Okay, and that sets your idle. The early ones, all the twin coil saws, and I don't know if you really get in here and see this or not, but your idle screw is actually, it'd be easier to see if I took that other air filter out.
Right?
Yeah, the idle screw is actually mounted in the case, not on the carburetor. And this is where it can drive you crazy. So, see that idle screw stays in the case. If you went from one direction to the other, it wouldn't be a big deal. You could put the newer style carb on one of these old saws and just find yourself another hole in here, and you can find your way into the idle screw. It's not a big deal. If you went the other way and tried to put this on a newer saw, I'm not really sure what you do unless you could find all these individual carb parts to change it over, and that would be kind of frustrating. That's really the main stuff.
Yeah, the linkage is the one that's it's hardest to deal with. I mean, you don't want an orange handle on a red saw.
I've done that.
Yeah.
And one time I built a 670 that I didn't even have a tank to finish it. So I did it. So I had 2 ways to set the idle on that one.
Yeah. But I think the real crux of it is this, is if you use the Husky top end with their nylon block, it pulses through the intake manifold block by drilling the hole in the carburetor. That's your solution. You're going to have all the linkage for high idle anyway.
Yeah, right.
So really it's a matter of blending the Husqvarna cylinder to the Jonsered, and the thing you have to worry about most is just simply pulsing the carb. And Bob pointed out how to drill that hole.
Yeah, I think, you know, here again, we're assuming that you got a carb that's okay.
Right.
So this is, like, say you got a saw, maybe there's nothing wrong with it, the carb is junk. What you could do is you could, you know, you could find a carb that may have been from a Husky, and you can migrate all these different things over there.
Pull the little shaft
Problem
out,
is,
yeah.
you know, Tillotson's out of business now. So, if you were to, you could still order carburetors for Husky 61s and 272s and all that, but, you know, they're sending you Walbros now. So now you have a different, you know, set of, you know, parameters because you don't have a Tillotson at all. So it's not necessarily a bolt right in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can pretty much get away with you know.
We're not talking high dollars on those Walbros, are you? How much do they cost?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, they are?
Yeah,
The
yeah, they're not cheap. But here again, this is just, you know, there's options that you can make work, and that's the whole idea here.
So the net is if you have one of these Jonsereds with a bad top end you can't get parts for, you can take a Husqvarna top end and intake and blend the Jonsered carburetor by drilling the pulse and plugging up that little top there.
Right.
And that's not a high dollar deal. Basically, you're just out the the Husqvarna top end. Of course, you'll probably use a 268 or possibly a 272. So that's really the net.
Yeah, well, it's easier to modify the Jonsered carburetor to work with the Husky than the other way around.
Right. Have to swap over all the linkage stuff. So, all right. What else? I mean, the ignitions are the same, right? The 2-coil and the 1-coil is the same as the 61 through 272. Bearings, seals, all that stuff is the same, right?
Yep, the whole bottom end's the same.
Clutches, chain brake stuff.
Yeah.
Other than the
There's
color.
still the same variations that took place over the years, and they pretty much took place in parallel.
Yeah.
If they changed something on the Husky, they changed it on the Jonsered.
Now here's another little detail you might want to talk about, because the Jonsered never really got the 272 top end.
Right.
They really, the 670 was really a 268 closed port, correct?
Yeah, sort of. It's kind of like, is it a 268 closed port? Is it a 266? I mean, you know, it's
Oh, that's right, because it has a different intake.
yeah, and it's
So
not
it's
the
kind of
same.
unique.
This is it.
Yeah.
It is a little bit unique. You know, I think the ports changed a little bit at about the time. You know, the 266 ports are quite a bit smaller than the 272 ports. This is a 268. I'm making a mess. The 268 open port, which people make such a big deal, you know, out of it. It's really a good run on top end. You can get these aftermarket or OEM. You know, the OEM ones now are made by Colvin Schmidt, you know, down in Brazil.
Yeah.
So it's still a German company. They're not coming from Germany. But, you know, don't discount these things as, you know, it's...
Well, we don't want to get up in the weeds, but you also have a different piston from the open to closed port.
Oh, yeah. And do not put the closed port piston, or the open port piston here, in a closed port saw. There's an interchangeability. 266, 670, and the 268 50 millimeter, the XP, they all take the same piston. They were different. You know, they had the full skirt piston on the 266 earlier, but all those numbers now supersede up. So you get that same 268 XP 50 millimeter piston, window piston. The open port top end doesn't use a window piston. And if you put it in any of the closed port saws, you will have a pig. It is absolutely, it just will not run. You'll swear it's like one of those Chinese kits, you know, with the 75,000 swish. And I got one, you know, from my buddy Eric up in Vermont. And I remember I traded him for something, and he had gotten a saw that was redone by somebody else. And he says, yeah, it's just in good shape. He goes, it's not as strong as my other 670s, but, so I got, like, this thing's a mess. Well, whoever rebuilt it before Eric got it, stuck that non-windowed piston from and it was aftermarket piston from the 268 open port, and it was a pig. And then I put the right piston in there, and she rips, and that's the one I had up to your place not that long ago.
I think part of it is, and this is going to be in the weeds, and then we can get along and start cutting, is the open port piston, the casting is actually one part of the actual channel. They've actually cast in the, I don't know if you have one, but the basic transfer port, the piston is one half of the transfer port. Where on the closed port, you have a windowed piston.
Yeah.
But the transfer port's totally enclosed within the casting itself. That's weeds. Anyway.
I mean, to me, it's not a big deal. What are we forgetting here?
I don't know.
Oh, I know, the air filters. Let's say you need an air filter. This is the Jonsered specific air filters that, you know, that's flat. This air filter, by the way, is also the 930 air filter. Okay, so it's got this, it's a little bit flatter here. If you need an air filter, you can't get these anymore, but what you can do is the 266 and 268 air filters, which you can get many places, aftermarket and OEM, actually fits right in here, and even though it's got this little higher crown, it does clear the top cover.
So there's your solution.
Yeah, so that trick does work on the 630s and 670s and all, but you can't do that on the 930 because it won't clear, because that 930 comes right up on here. So it's just another little thing. Hey, I need this, I need that, I can't get it. And we only found this stuff out because we're playing with them all the time, and there's no way that a dealer that's not familiar with this can look this up and find this out. So if a guy says no, you can't get the other, you know, he's not being an idiot. You know, just that information is not available to him.
And plus, you're going outside the standard parts books anyway. You know.
Yeah. Well, we take it for granted
Yeah, that's part of the hobby
that
thing.
hey, you know, we know all these tricks, but also, you know what, we take it for granted that we're spoiled because we have this piles and piles of parts and dead saws, and we don't necessarily recognize that, you know, everybody doesn't have that. What did you say yesterday? You found like, I got a whole another tote of 900
Two
parts
totes.
I didn't even know about. You know?
Yeah, 2 totes full.
So, I mean, you know, you got so much stuff you lose track of it.
Yeah,
So
of
it's not as
920s.
big a deal for us to go on a parts hunt.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, other guys, you know, there's certain things that, you know, some of this stuff, I don't know. I think the choke levers interchange, even though the linkages are different. This does drop down a little bit. So that's about all I can think of.
All right, we'll stop right there.